All right. Well, my watch says 6 p.m. and so I do like to be prompt, and so we'll kick things off tonight. My name is Chris Jodish, and I'm the program coordinator for Wayfinders. Wayfinders is part of the academic advising community. We work to connect students with the academic advisors, as well as to provide and highlight campus resources and community resources in this case, and help students make the most out of their experience here at the University of Arizona. So tonight we are pleased to have a conversation with Dr. Patrick Marcus. Patrick is a local Tucsonan, distinguished U of A alum, entrepreneur. He's president and CEO of Marcus Engineering. He also teaches, mentors, and serves on advisory boards for the University of Arizona. And he's a strong advocate for community involvement. And so one of the numerous accomplishments that Patrick has in his repertoire is he was named the 2014 Tucson Man of the Year, which I don't know much about that award, but I'm sure he'd be glad to talk about it. Or
it means I'm kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Tucson.
So I could go on, but you didn't come here to hear me speak. And so I'm going to hand this over to Patrick so he can talk about himself and get this kicked off.
All right. So as Chris said, I'm Patrick Marcus, and I own and operate Marcus Engineering, which is an engineering consulting company that I started in 2011. So we've had a pretty good track record, and I just built it out of virtually nothing, out of my home, and then moved into a few thousand square feet, and then a few thousand more square feet of office. And now today we're in a 5,000 square foot engineering and development lab near Grant and I-10. We've got about 10 employees, and we do about $1.5 million a year in business, and it's extremely profitable. And we have a great team of primarily electrical and computer engineers. Marcus Engineering does contract product development primarily in regulated product spaces. So we work on hard engineering design. So military, aerospace, tons of medical device, medical instrumentation, high-end industrial, safety critical consumer, pretty much all the types of things that can't break. Because if you tell your customer, oh, just go and reboot, power cycle it, it should work again, someone could get hurt or die. So our level of process and diligence in our engineering and the level of talent that our engineers have is very, very high. And we found that recruiting that kind of talent, that we do best hiring people who are not only talented academically, but are also engineering hobbyists. So those students who are hackers and makers and have a passion for engineering and building tend to do best at our company. It's not the only way to be a successful engineer, but it's the type of engineer that works well for us. So that said, I want to spend a little bit of time kind of telling you guys about how I got to where I am today, so I can be a little bit more relatable and speak to when I was in the position that you guys are in, so that this person who owns a business and has a PhD isn't just some abstract, far-off thing. And then I also want to speak to what I consider keys to being successful, not only in your engineering careers, and for those of you who aren't engineers. Actually, Chris, what was the demographic for attendees? Is it mostly engineers that are here? Is there anyone who's not?
Of the RSVPs that we had, they were all engineering students, and I see some other people have been joining us. So I think primarily we're dealing with an engineering crowd here.
So just for my own benefit, can you guys do a little hand raise either on video or in the participants list? Just let me know if you are not an engineer so I can keep it a little more generic versus being engineering career focused. Okay, I hope that means that everyone's an engineer. Okay, so typically what students are concerned with when I give a talk like this is learning a little bit about how to pick a major if you're undecided, Everyone seems to be interested in getting a job, how to get an internship, when they should get an internship. And a lot of those fall into or derive from some key features of your career path, your success, and what you choose to do with your time. And so I'm going to speak to and keep coming back to 4 key values and key value propositions. The first one is talent. Talent being your skill and your ability at the job duties, career duties, things that you study, things that you spend your time doing. So that's talent, how good you are at what you do. Number 2, passion. Very often, passion and talent are linked, but not always. Passion being how much you like to do the thing that you're doing, whether it be your hobby or your job or your activities. We tend to gravitate towards things that we are passionate about. We tend to be talented at things that we are passionate about, but not always. Sometimes we're passionate about things that we suck at. So you just want to see where those fit for you. The next one is value. And when I talk about value in this presentation, I mean delivery of value. I don't mean your personal values. I don't mean what you value. I mean your ability to deliver value to others. And that's important because people will exchange money for value delivered. That could come in the form of creating an engineering design. That can come in the form of helping people organize a project. That can come in the form of being talented at sales. But at the end of the day, if you aren't able to deliver value, then you are likely not to get compensated very well for the things that you're doing. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. And then the 4th point is network. Engineers usually suck at network. And when I talk about network, I mean people that you know, relationships that you create, attempting to deliver value to people around you so that you can grow relationships, generate favor points with people so that they want to help you when you need help because you help them when they need help. And network is another key aspect of career success. So those 4 points, again, those 4 key values are talent, passion, value delivery, and network. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got to where I was, and I'm going to tie in those 4 key values into the discussion. So I already talked about what Marcus Engineering is, but let me tell you a little bit about how I got there. So I will start with kind of how I grew up. I grew up in a middle-class household here in Tucson. My mother was a nurse, my father was an engineer, and my grandfather was an attorney. And so I had a little bit of exposure to all of those things. So by the time I got to college, I had some interest in law and some interest in engineering and some interest in medicine. In high school, however, I was a pretty mediocre student, and I wasn't very excited about going to some fancy Ivy League school and didn't really want to travel out of state anywhere. And I was fine with going to U of A for college. I knew I would go to college, but I didn't work very hard in high school. High school, grade school came pretty easily to me. So I never really developed strong study skills because I could usually wing it, skip homework, and do pretty well. And that's actually pretty common for engineers, not always, but that was the path that I was on and the path that I took. And the other thing that was interesting was because my dad was an engineer, I was interested in the things that he was doing, and I developed some skills as an engineering hobbyist from a very young age. I was building computers when I was an early teenager. I was playing with my dad's soldering iron. I was reading his DigiKey catalog, as crazy as that might sound, and I wasn't going to prom. I was playing video games. So that's just the kind of guy I was. But as that ties back into our key values is talent and passion. I really enjoyed engineering. I really enjoyed working on my car. I really enjoyed putting in a car security system. I enjoyed doing car audio. I enjoyed making my own little circuit boards. I really liked doing it. I was passionate about engineering before I really even knew that engineering might be a career for me. And because of that, I developed some talent. I learned something about circuits. I learned something about software programming. I understood a bit about how computers worked. And having a little bit of talent and a good amount of passion served me well as I moved on to the next stage, which was going to college. So again, not doing super well in high school. I went to college with pretty poor study skills. And the first couple of years of college, honestly, were a bit easier than high school. But as soon as I started getting into the serious engineering classes, those 300 and 400 level classes, it really started kicking me in the butt. And I realized that I was either going to have to retake classes or tighten up my game and develop some study skills. And luckily I chose the second path and developed a little bit better study skills and started hunkering down and squeezed by, honestly, in some of the classes that were hard for me. Like I struggled in vector calculus, I struggled in differential equations, and that made me struggle in electricity and magnetism because those were heavily dependent upon vector calculus and differential equations. And even to this day, I'm not very good at those things. So tying that back to talent and passion, I wasn't very good at those topics. So I wasn't passionate about them, and I never really learned them. And I left a hole in my skill set. And I really regret that. I wish I could go back and change that and put in the effort to be better at those. But it is what it is. Another thing I missed out on in college, and this is very common with engineers, is networking. I was pretty smart. I kept to myself. I didn't really do study groups. I didn't enjoy group projects. I kind of wanted to do things on my own. I didn't really go to office hours, and I didn't build relationships with other people. Well, guess what? Your opportunities and your jobs and your future come from relationships. And if people like you and you keep relationships with people, when there are opportunities, they will think of you. And when you need something, they will think of you. And it gives you an opportunity to stay in touch with them and help them as well, delivering value to them. So I kind of missed out on building a network while I was in college. So as I was finishing college, I still thought, well, while I was in college, I didn't address how I chose between law, medicine, and engineering. So let me go back to that. I actually decided to go the engineering route in school because if I did pre-law, I couldn't become an engineer without going back and doing engineering over again. And if I did pre-med, I couldn't really go back and do engineering after that unless I went back to school again. But if I did engineering, I could go to law school afterwards. And if I did engineering, I could go to medical school afterwards, as long as I took a little bit of biology and chemistry and a couple extra classes as tech electives. And so I ended up sticking with engineering, thinking that I was going to go to medical school. So I thought, well, cool, I'll go and be a medical researcher with an engineering degree, and I'll design medical devices. And then as I was shadowing doctors and looking at going to medical school and learning about medicine, I failed to find people that I was shadowing that had passion. They all seemed to hate medicine. They hate being part of the healthcare system. They hated health insurance. And this was back in the late 90s. It was much better back then. So you can imagine how hard it must be right now. So I dodged a bullet by recognizing that people in my field didn't have passion. So as you guys are looking at which disciplines and sub-disciplines to pursue as engineers, make sure you're talking to people in the industry you want to go after. Make sure that you're talking to people who have those jobs. And there's lots of different kinds of engineering jobs. Even if you're an electrical engineer or a mechanical engineer, you might become a project manager. You might become a sales engineer. You might become a design engineer. You might become a test engineer. You might become an applications engineer in any of those disciplines. And you don't learn about that in school. Do your internships. Talk to people in the field. Find out which one of those specialties makes sense for you, and find out who is nominally most passionate and most happy with their career. Because there's nothing worse than not having passion in your chosen discipline. And again, I'm glad I didn't go to medical school, because I don't know if I would have been as passionate about it or have as many opportunities as I did as an engineer and then later as a business owner. So when I graduated, deciding I didn't want to go to medical school, I actually decided to go and take a job at Raytheon. And that failed to meet my passion test. I hated Raytheon. And that's not to say it's a bad company, but I got put in a group that didn't push very hard and was working on a missile design that was done back in the 70s. So it wasn't exciting from a technology standpoint, and it just wasn't a good fit for me. And my talent showed, because they would assign me projects and I would finish them, and they'd say, well, we thought you were going to be working on that for the next month. And I'm like, well, it's been 4 days and I'm done with it. Um, and it just wasn't fun. So I decided to go back to graduate school, because primarily I didn't hate school yet. Again, passion. I still enjoyed learning, enjoyed school. So I was happy to stay doing it. And I decided to do biomedical engineering as a compromise between engineering and medicine. Was a pretty good choice. But again, I wasn't enjoying myself. I did not enjoy graduate school. I didn't enjoy the research environment. I didn't enjoy the pace. I wanted to sit down and design cool things. I was very interested in neuroprosthetics and robotic arms that could be controlled with your mind. And grad school was more about making baby steps and learning about what other people had done in the field and talking about that, rather than really spending time inventing new things. And I liked building and inventing new things. So grad school didn't actually work out very well for me. And it was kind of a hard road with my advisor, who just thought about things differently than I did and valued research and academia differently than I, who valued industry and invention more. So to alleviate that problem, I did two things. I went through the McGuire Entrepreneurship Program over at the Eller Business School, and I started learning about business. And I also joined up with an artist who was doing solar inspired and solar integrated art sculptures that were interactive. And so I started learning about integrating electronics and LEDs and solar into art. And I also got a part-time job working for this little solar manufacturing company. And it started out with me working on weekends, just soldering up boards. And then I started doing a little bit of design, fairly simple things, but it slowly grew from there. And what happened was I was developing new areas of talent. And I was also developing some new areas of value delivery. So in the part-time job, it was really interesting, because it was an 8-person company at the time, and they were making these multi-million-dollar pieces of solar manufacturing equipment. I mean, these machines were huge. Some of them were 20 feet long, 50 feet long, 100 feet long. These multi-ton vacuum chambers that were used to pump down to vacuum and use plasma vapor deposition to coat different types of materials on glass to turn them into solar cells. It was just crazy stuff that I'd never been exposed to. And there was a lot of what's called industrial controls, which at the University of Arizona, you don't get exposed to, but it's a whole nother discipline of electrical engineering. And industrial controls is the art of safety and automation for large manufacturing lines. And it's the kind of things that control conveyor belts and printing presses and semiconductor manufacturing, the manufacturing of microprocessors and ICs, and it's the tools and the processes for manufacturing solar cells as well. But anyway, so while I'm working at this little 8-person company, I went from working 1 day a week to working 2 days a week, and then 3 days a week. And I was actually starting to piss off my advisor, because I was working during the week when he thought I was supposed to be working on my research, but it turned out okay. And what happened was some opportunities arose while I was working at this little company. One day, the CEO came into my office where some other people were working, and he said, "Hey, we've got a trade show to go to in a couple of weeks, and we need some flyers. Does anybody know how to make flyers?" And I said, "Well, I like computers. I used to play with Photoshop a little bit and Illustrator, and I don't really know them well, but," and he just immediately said, "You're our new marketing person. Go make some flyers." And I was terrible at it. I was so bad at marketing, but I learned an appreciation for creating marketing collateral. And I did research and I learned about marketing, and that started adding some skill to my repertoire. And I was delivering value doing marketing, regardless of how bad it was. And then another day, the CEO came in and he said, "Hey, there's something wrong with our server. Does anybody know about computers?" And I said, "Well, I used to build computers." And he's like, "Great, you're the IT guy." And so I fixed the server. And then I started building an email server. And then I started taking over IT. And so as this progressed, I was developing talent. I had passion because I love doing new things and learning new things. And most importantly, I was delivering value to the company. And then by the time I was almost done with grad school, this company was, I think it was about 40 or 50 people. And I was still participating at a high level. And I was helping to manage R&D, and I was managing multi-million-dollar projects just as a grad student. And before I graduated, the CEO said, you know, why don't you skip that biomedical engineering mumbo jumbo and come and join us as a director with some equity in the company? And I thought, oh my God, this is the coolest thing. I'm going to be on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine by the time I'm 25. This is it. This is my chance. I'm going to make it. Well, as you guys can see, even though my background is very nice, I'm not rich, and that opportunity didn't pan out. And Marcus Engineering has actually done much better for me than what that little solar manufacturing company did, even though I had equity. But we never quite made it. We never quite pushed through. And it turned out the mistakes we were making was we were running the engineers or the business like engineers instead of running it like business people. And this is where going through the McGuire Entrepreneurship Program comes in, is I developed talent and value delivery in the areas of business. And I also learned new ways to network and build relationships. The McGuire Entrepreneurship Program put me in a room filled with 50 accountants, business students, marketing students. They don't think like engineers, it turns out. And guess what? All of those people don't think that the product and engineering is the coolest and most important aspect of the business. And it turns out they were right. Engineering is a piece of a business. And there's so much more important in operations, manufacturing, accounting, business strategy, sales, marketing, operations, leadership, all of these different things that I had no idea about. And I started learning how to communicate those values and how to value what the business people thought was important. And then that taught me how to tailor my values as an engineer into something that they could understand. And if I could communicate engineering values in a way that business people understand, and understand the business people's values and turn that into engineering values, that allowed me to be a bridge between engineering and business. Another talent, another skill set, and another way to deliver value to companies. So by the time I was done with that, and after I'd worked at this solar manufacturing company for another 5 years after graduate school, I realized they were never going to change. We were always going to run it like engineers and always going to quite just barely miss our opportunities for like that big buyout and that $100 million valuation. We just weren't going to quite get there. And we kind of peaked doing $60 million a year and about 100 people. And we never quite punched through. And then when the economy went down in 2006, 2008, it shrank down to 70, down to 50, down to 30. And I had an opportunity to spin off another company and grow that. And we had some of the same problems. And eventually in 2011, I resigned and I said, I'm just going to be a consultant. And because my equity is never going to be worth anything, I'm just going to work by the hour and deliver my talent and be passionate about my engineering. And that very quickly grew into Marcus Engineering. And because of the fact that I had talent across so many different disciplines, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of business leadership, a little bit of sales, a little bit of accounting, and quite a bit of engineering talent across broad areas, I was able to deliver products to people. And I was able to use the network that I was building and my engagement in the community to find customers and have people refer me. And it turned out to be really, really cool. And I built a great company and hired people and continued to grow my network. And it's one of the most valuable things I have is the relationships I have with other people, other engineers, other manufacturing companies, our community. A lot of our business comes from community referrals when people ask what I call super connectors, people that know everyone, and that's kind of their gig. When someone asks them, hey, who should we go to for engineering? They say, you should go talk to Patrick. Marcus Engineering does great work. The funny thing is the super connectors never worked with us, so they don't know if we're actually good at engineering, but they see us helping at the university. They see us mentoring students, and that automatically gives us credibility. You think I'm a good guy because I do good things. Doesn't mean I'm a good engineer, but you assume I am. And that's been the basis of growing the business, and it's worked out very, very well. So honestly, a lot of it was luck, and a lot of it was opportunity and grabbing opportunity when it was there. Opportunity to grow talent, opportunity to pick the things that I was passionate about to grow in. Finally realizing in my mid-20s that growing my network was important, and pulling that all together allowed me to deliver lots of value to people. And so that's kind of where I'm at and where things are. And I hope that helps kind of convey to you guys the importance of building your talent, following passion, being passionate about things that deliver value and leverage your talents. And also, please, please, please build relationships, build your network, learn to sell yourself, learn to sell your skills, and be able to communicate those things. Because if nobody knows you're good at stuff, no one's ever going to care. So you have to learn to communicate too. Even if you're an engineer and you don't like sales, you always have to be willing to sell yourself and sell your project as well. So let me stop for a minute. We can do two things. One, I can talk about a little bit about how that stuff ties into your major, your job, internships, which may already be obvious, maybe it's not, but I really like to get input from the participants. And what we typically do is we have Diane look at the chat, and you guys post a bunch of questions that you want to ask and that you're interested in. And then we go through each one of those questions. And I don't know if Diane will be able to hold the poll or if she's going to write it down by hand, but we want to vote on the questions from all the participants, and then just go through the top 3 to 5 questions with the remaining time and just talk about things and advise on things that you guys care about and try to have a little bit of discussion. So would you guys like to kind of talk about jobs, major, and I'll just kind of wing it, or would you guys like to ask questions in the chat? So why don't you guys do a hand raise in the participants if you would like to ask questions. There's one. Everybody else is gone. Okay, now raise your hand if you would like. There's 2. Now raise your hand if you would like me to just kind of generically talk about major, getting a job, internships and stuff. Okay, Q&A it is. So why don't you guys in the chat, each of you submit 2 or 3 questions that you're interested in, and let's try to compile those and then vote on them real quickly.
And I think, you know, with the nice small size that we have, hopefully we can get to most, if not all of the questions, actually.
Yep, I agree.
I think a really important one, definitely, that I want to hear you talk about, because it's something that I think most students struggle to learn as undergrads, especially if they're traditional age, is the ability to overcome nervousness about putting yourself out there. I really think that is like number one. And you probably remember from undergrad, it doesn't just happen overnight.
It's the worst thing ever, and I still hate it today. So while we're compiling questions, why don't I speak to that one? And then we can compile the questions and vote. Engineers are almost always introverts, and they generally don't have a lot of experience with public speaking. They generally don't have a lot of experience interacting with other people other than looking down at their shoes when they're standing in front of other people. Some of them are lucky enough to be debonair when it comes to women. Many of them do not. And for those of you who are women, same thing may apply to men, but we're shy. Some of us are not, but most of us are introverts. And I may seem to you as being articulate and extroverted, and I am absolutely not. And honestly, some of the best leaders out there in the industry and the best managers are actually introverts, because they worry about what other people think, because it does make them nervous to put them out there. And when they are out there, their heart rate goes up. And so their game goes up and the adrenaline's rushing. You know, I get nervous coming and talking to you students before it happens. And I sit there 10 minutes, you know, kind of twitching around and fiddling with my fingers and everything, because it's hard and it's scary. And honestly, the only thing that makes that better is just doing it and practicing. And, if you have the unfortunate opportunity to volunteer to give a presentation or to be the main presenter on a project, you got to do it. You have to take it, because the only thing that makes it better is practice. And you're going to screw up. And I screw up all the time. But the thing is, when you screw up, the secret is when you screw up, people don't know. They don't know you messed up. They don't know you missed a huge chunk of your presentation. You just keep going and don't say anything. And they just think it was all the way it was supposed to be. Sometimes you'll trip over your words. People do it all the time. Sometimes you'll physically trip. People do it all the time. Nobody cares. It's not a big deal. And when you're in the spotlight and everybody's staring at you, it feels like a big deal, but it's actually not. And people are very forgiving, and it doesn't really matter. So, just go ahead and suck. It doesn't matter. And then you just get better at it each time you do it. And the other thing that's really important is, as you put yourself out there, whether it be an interview, talking to a group of people, giving a presentation, always go and find a peer, or always go and find the instructor, or talk to the people that you presented to and ask them for feedback. And don't say, how did I do? Because everyone will say, you did great. It was wonderful. That's BS. That doesn't help you. What you need to know is where you sucked. So you always have to ask, how could I have done better? What would you have done differently? Force them to give you some criticism, because they will gravitate towards the thing you did worst and try to be really nice about it, but they'll at least tell you. So always ask people, what could have been better? What would you have done differently? Not how did I do? Was it good? Did you like it? Because they will always say, it was great. Unless they're your significant other and they may criticize the crap out of you. But generally people will be nice and not want to be confrontational. So always ask them the hard question of what could have been better. Okay, so let's look at the questions. And
I just wanted to clarify, because I get the impression from questions that everybody in here is engineering related, except Natalia. Is she engineering too?
So Natalia is actually my fiance. She wanted to see how I present and also be that person who's willing to give me some feedback on my presentation skills
Gotcha.
After this is done, to see how.
Sorry, I missed that part. Awesome. Okay, good. Well, so then we know what we're dealing with here. All right. Well, let's jump in. Hiram wanted to ask about your initial day of starting up your own business and how you were able to branch out. I think you touched on that a little bit in terms of relying on your relationships, but maybe a few more specific pieces of advice around that.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that briefly, and then if you wanna follow up and ask a little bit more detail, we can go ahead and do that. At this point, after I answer something, please ask additional follow-up, and let's have a discussion on it if you don't feel it was fully addressed. So starting my own business was difficult, and I would say that the keys for me and the keys for branching out were starting small and starting slow. You can't know everything about accounting and forming an LLC and doing non-disclosure agreements and contracts and all this stuff right from the get-go. And you can't afford it anyway. It just takes too much time. You don't want to pay for lawyers. It's silly. And so what I did was I started out scrappy. I just had a one-page little agreement just saying, this is what I'm going to do and this is what I'm going to charge. And I started working for people. And I started working for people that were kind and easy. And my first project was $5,000. And I spent a couple of weeks on it. And it went okay. And I learned some things and I did some things wrong and I misestimated on some stuff, but it worked out okay. And, my first year was a lot of $5,000 projects, a lot of going in and working as an hourly contractor at other companies and kind of being on site and getting some direction from their leadership and things that they needed done. And the other thing I did that was kind of key in terms of branching out was it's actually really, really hard because you have to spend 30 hours a week on business development and then 40 hours a week executing and engineering your projects. And that's a pretty hard go. So I would spend about 6 hours a day running around town, going to meetings, going to community events, trying to build relationships. And then I'd work evenings and weekends doing engineering design for, I don't know, probably the first 2 or 3 years. It was really, really, really hard work. And while I was doing it, I wasn't sure it was such a good idea or a good plan. And one of the things that helped was hiring an intern, just getting someone to help me solder and build cables and do some basic work. And also had an intern kind of help me with a little bit of Bluetooth software programming and stuff. They sucked at it, but it still helped me move the project forward. And they were bad at making cables, but it still helped me move the project forward. And then another thing I did was I always took on as much business as I could handle and then a little bit more. And then I got to the point where I was able to hire a more senior contractor to help me write some software. And so that started freeing up my bandwidth and my cash to do some more things. As that moved along, my wife at the time, she said, "Hey, honey, can you stop having weird people over to the house to work with you every day in that little tiny office?" And then I went and got a real office, and that upped my game a lot too. I was no longer solo consultant working for $95 an hour. I was Marcus engineering with a couple of employees, working for $100 or $125 an hour. And these days we're $150 to $200 an hour. The value proposition increased, and recognizing our value and focusing on projects that did recognize the value and turning away ones that didn't recognize the value was really important. Another key thing was being willing to say no to pain in the ass customers or customers that weren't going to make the company a lot of money. That's hard to do when you don't know where your food is going to come from. Being willing to say, you know what, I'm going to bid this high because it's not worth my time, or I know it's going to be a pain in the butt. And sometimes they said yes, and I'm like, oh crap. Well, it's a good thing I made it worth my while by charging them a lot. And other times they just said no thanks and walked away. And that was okay, as long as I was doing a lot of work on sales to make sure that people were still interested. So I hope that gives a little bit of insight. If you want to follow up, please ask some more. Otherwise, we'll move on to another question.
Yeah, I thought that was great. I think it really ties into the whole issue of coming into adulthood and learning how to set boundaries too, which is hard. It's hard
guys, adulting sucks. I don't like doing it. I don't want to do it. Part of the reasons I'm doing this is so I can minimize adulting. I had to over adult for a while, but I'm adulting less these days because I get to do things like this instead of actually working. It's a lot more fun.
That's awesome. I have a good next question that I think I know the answer to, but I'll be curious to see what you have to say. And I just have to say, Jerry Lynn, I can't believe you're here. I'm so excited. I can't see you. Jerry Lynn's one of my former students, so I'm very happy to see her pop in. So Eris wanted to know if it would be more useful to add a mechanical major to electrical or do more research in an electrical major. Because it's hard to do both double major and do a ton of research.
So this really comes back to three of the core values I talked about. Talent, what are you good at? And you need to be good at it. If you're really, really good at electrical engineering already, and you also want to be really, really good at mechanical engineering, go for it. That's great. But if you're going to be mediocre at electrical engineering and mediocre at mechanical engineering, it may keep you from finding a good job. Because what can happen is if you are too diluted in your skill set, people have a hard time figuring out where you're going to fit. Because most companies are not going to hire you out of your undergrad to do electronics and mechanical engineering work simultaneously. They're going to slot you into one or the other. Once you have 5 or 10 years experience, having that skill and background in both will benefit you as you move towards systems engineering and project management, or if you're in a small company where you're the electrical engineer, but you can also do some 3D printing and some modeling and SolidWorks and stuff. That can be really, really, really useful, but don't sacrifice talent at your core for mediocrity at both. The second one is passion. I mean, if you love both, spend the extra time being really good at both. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it all comes back down to value delivery. If you can deliver a lot of value as an electrical engineer and as a mechanical engineer, go for it. Now, as those compare to research, that's hard for me to answer because as an employer, if you tell me I did a bunch of extra research, that doesn't show me any ability to deliver value. If you said you did a bunch of research on something that developed a skill that's useful to an employer, then go for it. That is useful. But if you're doing research on something that is so niche or if you're just shuffling papers around or examining data or reading articles about a unusually niche area and that doesn't translate into value delivery for an employer, it might not benefit you all that much. And for those of you who want to go out into industry, I always recommend spending your time doing internships, because you can't have too many internships and you can't start doing them too early. And the right number of internships is as many as possible, and the wrong number is 0. And the wrong number is 1, and the wrong number is 2 if there's somebody else who had more internships and more experience than you did, because you are in competition with your peers. So make sure you are clotheslining and elbow dropping some people on the way into your classes, because you need to be better than the guy or the girl sitting next to you, so that you can be the one who's picking your job, not the one who's hoping that an employer is going to pick you. Picking your job sounds more appealing, doesn't it, than hoping someone's going to choose you for whatever job happens to be out there. It's a different value proposition for you if you can deliver more value. But that's a little bit of a sidetrack, although it's a very important point. So there are some situations where research can be valuable. Again, if it's developing a skill that's useful to industry, if it's in a research lab where the researcher is tied to industry, and that can open up opportunities for you to go work in industry, or if you want to stay in academia for a while, or planning on teaching. If you can identify those things in the research area, go for it. But otherwise, I would probably spend the time developing those skill sets, whether it be internship or the research developing that skill. What else we got?
Yeah, good answer. I always say it's not about whether you should add another major or minor. It's what's the value added? What are you going to get out of it, right?
Yep, that's absolutely good advice.
Yeah, it's it's not what the words on the resume, it's what did you do while you were doing it. And you can do a mechanical minor too if you want, if you don't want a double major. All right, so Colin asked, what would be the most useful business outlook that you've taken from your time that engineers typically overlook coming out of school? I think you mean, right, Colin?
Colin, could you kind of clarify that for me? Just help me understand a little bit better what you mean by business outlook.
Sorry, so I meant more, since you're running a business, what are you either looking for in new employees or looking for in order to progress?
Okay, so what I look for in new employees is, again, the core values, passion and talent. I want someone to come in here and be an amazing A+ electrical engineer, an amazing A+ computer engineer. And I want them to have broad skill sets. I want them to be interested in or capable at other things. One of my electrical engineers, who's become somewhat of an engineering manager, he is a junior at the College of Engineering, and he leads $100,000 projects with very little input from me. He's a good engineer. He's good at leading other interns. He's good at project management. He wasn't always. He expressed interest. I gave him some opportunities. He worked hard at them. He put in extra time and he failed a lot, and then he got better at it. And now he sucks less. And now he is pretty good at those things. So he's a very good electrical engineer, but he's more versatile. One of my computer engineers just happens to enjoy photography and video editing. And guess what? He takes a lot of marketing photos for us, and he's gotten good at it. It's awesome. Some of our engineers are amazing. Some of our electrical engineers are amazing at programming. Some of our electrical engineers are good at talking with customers. But from a resume standpoint, I really look for interest and passion in engineering. So I pretty much only hire guys who have been playing with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis since they were 4 years old, if I can find those people. And they tend to do better at our company with those things. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great.
And then I think this is a really great question that kind of ties back into the one before it about whether you would recommend somebody doing business or entrepreneurship while in college, or just learn on the job and in the process as you become an engineer. Does that summarize it for you? Is it Haiti or Hattie?
It's Adi.
Adi. Okay, awesome.
You know,
did I summarize that okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's also a good question. Again, be excellent at your core, because employers, when they have job postings, they have stacks of hundreds of resumes on their desk. And they pick each resume up and they look for a reason to throw it away. And they look for, out of those several hundred, they look for the 10 that they're actually going to read carefully and actually going to consider. And they look at skills and they look at experience and they look at articulation of those skills and they look for some passion. And again, if you are off the beaten path, meaning that you're diluted between engineering and business, it can be hard to see where you fit and to be hired for that electrical or mechanical engineering position. But it does position you well for small companies. I would look carefully at someone who had both engineering background and business background. I would say, I wonder if this would be a good project manager. I wonder if this would be a good sales engineer. I wonder if this is someone who could help me write proposals because they understand a little bit about business and a little bit about engineering. And if that's something that's of interest to you, then that's an okay thing to pursue. But again, be good at your core. Don't dilute too much. Learning business while you're employed is a perfectly good thing and fine thing. And in most situations, those who excel at their core discipline will be given opportunities to do project management, some business things, and they very often aren't good at it. But if you've got a little bit of background, that can lead you into those roles sooner. But it's hard to be good at technical leadership and business duties within an engineering environment without being pretty good as a design engineer first. And let me kind of flip it on its head. If you're really, really good at business and you're a crummy engineer, you're going to have a hard time getting into junior engineering organizations. Adi, does that help at all? Do you want to ask any more detail on that?
It does help.
Okay.
But I think your other question kind of ties into that, though, actually. You know, if a student is a recent graduate and didn't necessarily have internships during undergrad, should they look for an internship as a recent grad, or just try to go for the whole enchilada as a systems with an EE minor, go for applying for full-time engineering jobs?
Well, I would certainly try to get the full-time engineering job. Absolutely. And because you haven't had internships, you're going to have a little bit more challenge. So what I would do is I would apply for jobs and I would make yourself stand out. Don't send out 100 resumes with a generic cover letter. Tailor each and every one to the company, to the hiring manager. Do research on them. Show passion, show interest in what they're doing, and that will help you get your foot in the door. And if you aren't making a hit early on and you've graduated, spend some time developing skills. And going and getting an internship after you graduated can be okay if you can't get a full-time job, but it can also be a red flag to employers that there was a reason you couldn't get a full-time job after you graduated. So it can be a little bit of a negative. Now, that said, having an internship for a year after you graduate is better than not having any engineering experience for a year after you graduate. Because if you spend a year looking for a job and you don't get hired and you didn't have an internship, they're definitely going to think there's some reason people weren't hiring you. So that's even worse. So I would do this. I would apply for full-time jobs and see how you do, and then maybe also apply for internships depending on the timing of things. And it's okay to say no to the internships. But if you are a good engineer and good at what you do, then doing an internship after you graduate may be a disservice to your resume. But if you're struggling and you're not quite there and maybe you're not quite as good as your peers, and that's okay. Sometimes people take a little bit more time to ramp up. Then the internship might be a good thing to do to take that extra time and grow some more skill sets. Grad school isn't a terrible idea either if you tailor it to building the skills that you didn't build while you were an undergraduate. So, you know, work part-time, work on your master's degree or something if you can, or work in a research lab that has industry ties as well is another potential option.
I have research experience and also have a startup company. That's what I was doing through college. So now I'm still debating if I should like go to a job or continue building my startup company, which is kind of doing great now. So
Do both. Don't sleep.
yeah, that's what
I'm serious. I'm serious. There's nothing wrong with chasing your startup and getting a cushy job at Raytheon so that you can pay the bills, build some experience, build some money, and then go home, work your 8 to 5 at Raytheon, go home and hit it with the startup for another 4 hours. But it is going to take that extra work. If you want that startup to succeed and you want to have income while you're doing it, 60 to 80 hours a week, man, at least for a few years. And it's awesome and it's great and it's not for everyone, but that's the way you get there.
Thank you. It is taking time already, but thanks.
Do it. Do it. Do it.
I'm tired just hearing that advice. So Patrick, did you go to a lot of conferences or conventions like IEEE that you would recommend as good places to do networking and relationship building and looking for internships?
There weren't, I never really participated in the traditional engineering societies associated with my discipline. I did spend some time going to industry-specific trade shows. And to answer the core question, yes, going to trade shows and going to industry events are terrific ideas. Building those relationships are the best way to find jobs. It is so much better to talk to the engineering manager that you met and that you've been building a relationship with and slide your resume to him personally through an email than by sending your email in through the portal at some company and talking to the random HR person that has no idea what you're good at other than looking for the keywords in your resume. The relationships will make the job opportunity 100% every time. That is what you want to do, how you want to build your career, unless you can't or unless you missed out. Then you send out resumes. Generally speaking, good people don't send resumes in through portals. They get pulled from opportunity to opportunity through their network, through their relationships, because of their reputation for passion, talent, and the network that they've built.
Which is very good advice. Chris, had you started recording when you started this or no? Because I started when I got in, but I didn't. You may have already done it.
Yes, we've been recording since.
Oh, good. Okay, because I think this is exactly what I want our students to hear. This is going to be must-watch viewing for our students.
Yeah, you might want to take some snippets from this and turn them into indoctrination videos, and maybe even add some kind of like smoke in the background and make it look more like a Wizard of Oz with red glowing eyes.
Total like propaganda.
Yeah, we can do some editing.
Engineering buildings on those TVs.
It's true. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for other majors. BMEs are actually not as shy as a lot. They do a pretty good job, but then there's always the ones that are super talented but aren't going to tell anybody that. So this advice is gold. And it's much better coming from you than from me. They're going to just think I'm making it up. So, and then we had another question about, first Colin, who's interested in working in integrated biosensors or brain-machine interfaces, and how you would rate a double major of BME and ECE in terms of going into that field.
So, Diana knows that I'm a little hard on BME undergraduate careers because of the fact that it's a pretty distributed skill set, and it's hard for employers to attach the value proposition to BME because there's so many super cool and valuable subdisciplines. It's hard to say, here's the BME skill set and here's what the BME can do.
Which is why he's a double MEE.
Good. And it's a hugely valuable skill set further on in your career. It's been wonderful for me in medical device and medical instrumentation because it's a systems level skill set. And I practice primarily systems engineering. When I'm doing engineering work, it's mostly systems level work. So it's wonderful stuff. I would focus on being really good at the electrical engineering and then learn electrical engineering subdisciplines that would be leveraged in the integrated sensors and brain machine interface stuff. So subdisciplines of electrical engineering. learning a little bit about materials and electrodes and some of those different types of things. That's a huge issue in brain-machine interface stuff. Generally, you're measuring electrical signals through RF for brain-machine interfaces or through actual implanted electrodes on those things. None of them work very well. I don't think that there's very many career opportunities in brain-machine interfaces still. That was my area of talent and research in graduate school, and it wasn't really a viable career option. It's going to improve, but there are some fundamental challenges in brain-machine interfaces that keep us from having robotic arms that you can buy at Best Buy that do things. So it's kind of a niche area. So just be careful of that. If you get really, really good at it, there's the job out there, but you might have to move there for it and go and find that company doing that stuff. Again, integrated sensors, brain-machine interfaces, precision analog, moderate speed analog, learning how to deal with galvanic isolation in sensor systems, how to measure very, very low voltage signals, digital signal processing, analog filters are very important things. If you're doing sensors, sometimes low power and efficient software and low power sleep modes in software and in hardware can be very, very important. A lot of the sensor systems these days are Bluetooth, Zigbee, ultra wideband based, and doing those with low power and thoughtful systems engineering can be very, very important. What other subdisciplines are useful for those things? I think I covered most of the major ones for that particular industry area. Read the research, keep up on the technology, and if that's where you want to be, you should be pursuing LinkedIn relationships with the engineering managers at the companies that are doing that kind of stuff. There's probably only a couple of dozen worth their salt in the country. You should be able to look them up, find them, get on their radar.
Awesome. And I think there was a question up above that, Eris, I don't know if you felt like it got covered when you were talking about entrepreneurship. He was trying to tie into the question about whether or not it would be useful to do a certificate program. And Eris, I think you probably mean McGuire, right? The McGuire Entrepreneurship Program, or do you want to clarify that?
As a new venture development minor that takes like normally 2 courses, but then you can do it with 4 courses, covers entrepreneurship, marketing, finance, but it's short. So I don't know if it's worth to do that or instead to get into projects or focus more on internship.
It depends on what you want to do. I did the equivalent of the new venture development program while I was in graduate school. It was a year-long business development, and it was hugely valuable for me. But I was already a talented electrical engineer, so I was growing a peripheral skill set that allowed me to grow into a business leader and a technical leader and other things. Early in your career, it kind of depends on what you want to do. If you're going to go and work for a little tiny company and you're positive you want to do that, be a good engineer and get those business skills. And then I think you'll be able to demonstrate to a small company that you kind of get it and understand what they're doing and understand what some stock options mean and why engineering something in a particular way might have a value proposition for the business, or might be a sales proposition or a marketing proposition. It's a useful skill set. But again, it kind of depends on what you want to do. If you're doing it because it sounds fun, but you really just want to practice engineering, it might not help you all that much. If you're a mediocre engineer and you want to go and do the business stuff, it might keep you from getting a job. It might be better to focus on the internship and being a really solid engineer. So it kind of depends on where your skill level is before branching out into that area. I hope that helps provide some clarity. But again, you got to be able to deliver value, and you got to be able to deliver more value than your peers. So being better than your peers at engineering and adding entrepreneurship, A+. Being mediocre at engineering because you did some entrepreneurship stuff might keep you from being noticed in the stack of resumes.
All right, well, those were all the written questions that we had. I don't know if anybody else has anything that they want to ask verbally or still type in. We only have, what, 2 minutes left. So actually, we got through all the written questions, Patrick. That's fantastic. But anybody else have one last quickie parting shot before we let Patrick give his final comments? No, was this helpful for you guys to get some advice like this from a real world engineer? Awesome. Well, everybody that wasn't here missed out, but we're going to make them watch the recording.
There you go.
Oh, it was very helpful. Good. Okay, so we're getting feedback that this was really helpful, Patrick. Thank you. I'm also hearing that a lot of kids are in lab right now or studying for a big test tomorrow and at a review session. So typical engineers, they aren't just slacking around watching Netflix instead. They're getting ready for the next thing. So,
Well, if this was useful to just one person, it was certainly worth my time. So that's no problem. I can hang around for a few minutes if anybody wants to just have some one-on-one or one-on-three or however many people hang around conversation. Otherwise, we're done.
awesome. Thanks, you guys. Really appreciate you being here. And Chris and the Wayfinders program for, I am repping the Wayfinders program for setting this up. And I'm really glad that we had those of you that were here tonight to be, you know, first in the know to get this information from Dr. Marcus. So thank you for your time and for everybody for coming in here.
Yes, thank you, everybody. This was a great gathering of people and hearing some awesome information, you know, firsthand that you just can't get everywhere. So we're pleased that you were here tonight. And yeah, feel free to ask Patrick some additional questions if you have them.
And Chris, I'm happy to hang around if you need to go on. I can, since I'm a host as well, I can keep going while students connect afterwards.
All
Or
right,
you
well,
can
thank you,
stay.
Diana.
You can stay. All right, don't be shy, guys.
I have a question for you, Dr. Marcus.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Jerry Lynn, and I studied biomedical engineering for my undergraduate degree. And currently right now, I'm studying industrial engineering. I'm getting my master's and looking to apply to PhD programs in industrial engineering for the fall of 2021. And so my ultimate career goal is to be able to apply some industrial and systems concepts to biomedical engineering systems, healthcare systems, and things of that nature. So have you seen a lot of people or any people in the past kind of gone this path, switching from biomedical? Of course, I feel the same way that you do about the biomedical program, not really getting, you know, the hardcore skills. And so that was, you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to switch over to industrial. So what do you know about, I don't know, maybe do you know any people who've kind of gone this similar path that I'm taking on right now?
So I can't think of anybody in particular off the top of my head. And admittedly, because I didn't have significant education in systems and industrial engineering, I'm a little weak on what some of the skill sets are in industrial engineering that can be leveraged. And again, I typically work with smaller companies where a lot of the deep skills that systems and industrial engineers have don't get leveraged very often. For instance, looking at large population statistics and optimization of processes and things are things that often require some scale to gather enough data to make those improvements. Now that said, I can think of plenty of situations where those industrial engineering skill sets can be applied to the medical healthcare system, the medical space. So if you look at larger companies like Roche, like Ventana Medical Systems, and they have these large organizations where they're delivering pharmaceuticals, they're manufacturing pharmaceuticals, they're manufacturing diagnostic systems. There's a lot of statistical data that comes in. There's a lot of process optimization and that occurs. There's a lot of need for instrumentation improvements. So that's one career path where I could see the skill set becoming valuable. I'm not exactly sure what the early career stage foot in the door is for those things beyond trying to find a graduate school research opportunity that again is tied in to industry so that career pathway becomes clear. Another space where those skill sets I think may become very, very valuable, and I apologize because again, I'm not hugely informed on industrial engineering, But I think that the state of the healthcare system, its efficiencies, the processes in place, and the opportunities for software tying things together, creating processes for improvement and analyzing those improvements or deficiencies is a huge area that companies are spending tons of money in. So potentially some industrial engineering with some focus and experience in large software systems and software processes, along with kind of self-study in software requirements and regulatory requirements as they relate to the healthcare system and healthcare processes could elicit some interesting career paths and some leadership and management roles kind of guiding software development. I don't know if that would be something that's of interest to you. Does that help at all?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
So I'll just throw out.
Soak it up. They want to soak you. They want to soak up all your knowledge, Patrick.
I'll just throw out something related to some of the things that Colin was talking about, related to brain-machine interfaces. And I don't work in that area very often anymore. Certainly we take those clients when they come along, but we do have a project that I think is going to start this year that is related to brain-machine interface. And it's a disposable medical device that uses EEG, electroencephalography, to measure brain waves on the forehead, and also some electrodes that kind of attach near the earlobes and everything. And it's meant to be a clinical tool in hospitals to detect dementia. And what's interesting is that different types of surgeries and different levels of anesthesia and different scales of aging can elicit dementia. And the current tests for dementia are actually pretty difficult, and you can be pretty deep into dementia before it is apparent and known. And the medical and health outcomes for patients and outpatients who have dementia after surgeries or during surgeries are far lower than those who are healthy. So detection of dementia early and treatment of dementia is actually really important and valuable. And so the business plan for this particular company and project, show it's a multi-billion-dollar industry and it's going to save so much money, which is a typical pitch for these kinds of things. But what it means is that we're going to develop a device that is based upon some university research that was technology transferred, that contains some algorithms for looking at the frequency spectrum and the power spectrum in the frequency spectrum, for those of you who are familiar with FFTs and those types of things, and using that to determine whether or not a patient has dementia. And some of the challenges are a little bit of materials engineering associated with electrode development and contacting and working with 3M for a disposable adhesive electrode structure that is bonded to some electronics, getting the cost down on that, being extremely low power, doing the digital signal processing and precision analog measurement, and getting it to a price point that's going to be suitable for these clinical applications. It's going to be so much fun. We're just waiting for the darn customer to finally say go. And they've been saying, oh, we'll start it in 30 days for almost a year now. So I'm hoping it'll be towards the end of this year or beginning of next year or middle of next year or the end of next year or someday. But it should be a pretty cool project. And I thought you might find that interesting because it's related to the brain-machine interface stuff. Okay, that gave you guys some time to think of questions. If you don't talk to me or ask any questions, I'm going to go home and have dinner.
Having just lost my mom to both dementia and post-surgery complications, really? You got my attention.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I mean, not in a good way, but that's so interesting to connect it to someone personally. Yeah,
well, especially not being able to be with her in the hospital or at her care center because of COVID. So that complicated it because I couldn't advocate for her, and she, and they missed a broken femur in the ER and sent her home for 10 days, but that's a whole nother story.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm so
I know.
sorry.
There's a lot of stories like that, right? That she ended up COVID, but it was COVID related for sure.
Those are often the stories that end up getting some of these companies started, is because of a personal relationship and a passion for something to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else.
I'm just amazed to think that electrodes would be able to detect early dementia? That kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really interested, I can certainly forward some of the university research papers that just kind of, talk about it. But, the guts of it
No,
is
I won't be able to understand.
they did clinical experiments and clinical trials, and they determined that, hey, if you see this ratio of this over this, then there's this much likelihood that they have dementia, and it's enough to be statistically significant. Bada boom, bada bing, you got a product.
That is the potential for that gives me the chills.
About the EEG kind of setup, is it just superficial measurement or is it like actual through the skin?
Sorry, ask that again.
So EEG, is it superficial skin level?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that would just be like adhesive electrodes or some electrodes with some electrode gel on them, getting an impedance of a few K to a few tens of K to the forehead region, and you can kind of make some differential EEG measurements. Pretty typical EEG signals.
Very cool.
If I can block you from going to eat, what,
Please.
because you mentioned that it's important for people to know the value that you can give. What are the tips that you would be able to give about how to present your value and how to describe it so people can kind of get it?
Okay, first, you have to learn what the other person values. So that means asking questions lots of times. So if you are applying for engineering jobs, then you want to, well before the time that you are applying for jobs, be talking to these people, asking them for advice. Most people that are in industry are happy to give advice to students and spend, just connect to them on LinkedIn, say, hey, I'm really interested in your industry. I think these things that you've done are really, really cool. And again, flatter them. Not too badly, but point out that you're paying attention to what they've done and say, would you mind a 10-minute phone call just so I could get some career advice? Because I think what you've done is something that I would be interested in doing. They're never going to say no unless they're jerks or they're just too busy. And ask them a couple of times, because the worst thing that could happen is they don't respond or they say no. And what are the consequences of that? Nothing. You might feel a little embarrassed, but who cares? Your ego doesn't mean anything. And you don't even have to tell anyone about how embarrassing it was. It doesn't matter. She'll just do it. So you got to find out what people value. And then how to pitch that is really, really easy. Repeat what their answers were. Repeat what they said. Talk to the engineering manager today, 6 months from now, apply for a job and say, I got good at XYZ and I think I can do XYZ. And it just happens to be the XYZ that he told you 6 months ago. He might not remember, he might remember. But that's basically what you're doing. And you want to gather that information from a bunch of people and a bunch of career people, like talking to people like me. What's important? You're an electrical engineer. Play with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. Be good at some software. Be good at circuit design. Play with Altium Designer. Play with Cadence OrCAD. Play with DipTrace. Play with Eagle. Build some things. Learn how to make some stuff. Be the person who actually did something on your senior design team, not the person who just happened to be on a good design team. Be the person who did the work. Because I guarantee you, if you interview with me, I will know within 5 minutes whether you were just present on the team or the person who did all the work. And I'm going to hire the person who did all the work, not the person who was just present. And those things become pretty obvious. Find out what kind of interview questions they ask and be good at those things. But generally speaking, if you have some passion and you kind of dig into your field and learn to build and make some things and actually learn, it will become pretty obvious when you're interviewing with people and you show that passion and show that talent. Just one example. Many years ago, and maybe you guys still do this, everyone was doing a micromouse project. There was a micromouse that they did, and it followed a line on a piece of paper, and it was very exciting and very great. And I would interview students all the time, and they all said micromouse on their resume. There was no distinction between them. So I asked them about the micromouse. I'm like, how does it work? Oh, well, there's a little phototransistor and it follows a line. Well, how does that work? How did you drive the LED that illuminated the little black line? How did you determine the gain of the phototransistor that worked? How did you power it? What kind of battery did you use? Why did you choose that battery? What's the difference between a lithium ion battery and a AA battery? How do you charge a lithium ion battery? What's important about charging a lithium ion battery? And you just dig and you dig and you dig and you see whether people have a friggin' clue about what they did, or whether they say, well, I got the micromouse kit and I plugged the stuff together. Well, actually, Bob on my team, he plugged the stuff together, but I did the micromouse project. That guy doesn't get a job from me. The guy who can tell me about the lithium ion battery and the fact that you current charge them for a period of time and then you float voltage them for another period of time until they reach 4.2 volts, that's the guy that understands electrical engineering. That's the guy that understood his project. And that's the guy I'm going to hire. Make sense?
A lot of that advice I would say is very transferable to reaching out to faculty for research, right? You flatter them by doing research about what their background is and what they're working on and what you know about it, and say, you know, I'm new to research, but I'm super excited about this field and I read some of your papers. You know, Dr. Van Dyke, our new VP of Research and BME faculty, gave the same advice at a workshop last week. He's just like, you've got to do your homework and then talk to people and flatter them, and people's egos will respond, whether it's overtly or subconsciously.
Especially faculty, because they're not in it for the money.
Right.
They're in it because they want to be the best in a field. And that's usually driven by passion and ego and wanting to be recognized as the best in the world at something. And so if you recognize that, and this isn't like, you know, messing with people or taking advantage of them, it has to be genuine. But if you are genuinely admiring of them and think what they did is great and cool, and you express that to them, they will usually reciprocate and be appreciative of your passion for their passion. So kiss a little butt.
So
Just a little button, don't suck. That's your summary,
kiss
right?
Kiss button, don't suck.
Oh no.
as a kind of follow up to that, when we are applying, and we know that we have to put effort on cover letters and also resumes. So on a cover letter, would you say, how would you balance between showing your skills in a cover letter and also like knowing the company and say, okay, I can be useful to that? Like, how would you go in an engineering standpoint to create that cover letter for a specific company? Let's say your company, for instance.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I would do is I would say, hi, I'm Bob. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I am really interested in your company. I think that the fact that you guys pursue X, Y, and Z and build A, B, and C is amazing for PEF reasons. That's very, very cool stuff. I think I would be an amazing fit for your company because you do A and I have done B, and that means I can do C for you. I am passionate about doing this stuff, and I have, well, you show that you're passionate about doing this stuff because I did this, this, and this on my own or while I was in school, and they will believe you on that. So let's say, for instance, you want to work at Ventana Medical Systems and you want to be a software engineer there. And you say, hey, I'm passionate about software engineering. I'm passionate about medical diagnostics. I think this product that you release that does cell staining for cancer research is so cool. I understand that you use these kind of algorithms for categorizing and classifying these pathologies. I have studied this, this, and this, and have already developed skills in this type of pathology staining and these kind of algorithms. I would love to be able to leverage that skill set to help you guys cure cancer. I think the fact that you, Bob, engineering manager of this product line at Ventana Medical Systems, I think what you did at your last job, building this and developing that, were so cool. and I have done X, Y, and Z, which is similar, but I think this demonstrates that I am also very good at these things, and I think it could also help you at Ventana. Would you be open to a 10-minute conversation to give me some advice on the kind of things that you look for in candidates? I realize that this is outside of your normal HR process, but I would really enjoy the opportunity just to get a little bit of insight and to get to know you. You know, I mean, that's just winging it. It could certainly be better. It could certainly be worse.
Yeah, it's perfect, actually.
But it's always, you know, recognizing them, showing interest, showing that your cover letter is not generic, identifying skill sets that you have and tying them into the things that the company needs to get done. And then asking for an opportunity to communicate, ask questions, and learn, and not take very much of their time. You want to ask for like 15-minute conversations. You know, it's funny. I had students from the university ask me for some time to participate in something I was happy to participate with. And they said, could you spare 1 to 2 hours to talk with us about something or other? And I was like, God, no. Heck no. And I even told them that. I said, don't ask me that. I will help you, but ask me for 15 minutes. And if you're interesting and not boring the crap out of me and I care about what you're doing, I will give you the 2 hours. It will just happen organically unless I've got a conflict. And if I'm a nice person and I have a conflict, I'll set up another call with you. But never ask people to burden themselves. Ask people to do things that are easy. Ask people to do things that they want to do. Hey, could you spend 15 minutes telling me how great you are? Cool. I like doing that. I like talking about myself. I'd be happy to tell you how great I am. And that means saying, hey, could I ask you a little bit about your career and how you got there? That's asking them to tell you how great they are for 15 minutes. They're usually happy to do that.
Okay.
What else?
We could probably go on all night, but I bet people do want to get to dinner eventually, or maybe it's just my kids.
Okay, why don't we call it? If anybody wants to follow up with me, I'm happy to chat with you one-on-one or answer some questions. Please reach out to Chris or Diana for an email for me. And please shoot me an email. If you try to call me, I'm not going to answer the phone because I don't answer weird phone numbers because they're almost always some guy from the Middle East saying that he's from the Social Security Administration, and I think he's not. Or someone wanting to extend my car warranty. So I don't answer the phone unless I know who it is, but I will respond to emails.
And I can attest, I approached Patrick completely out of the blue. He had no idea who I was, and he responded really quickly in a timely manner, and he's here tonight. So
and I also
please take him up on that offer.
I also missed an email and dropped it for a couple of weeks. So if you don't hear back from me, email me again because some of them do slip through sometimes, and it doesn't mean I don't like you.
Are you okay, Patrick, with if I put your Marcus Engineering email in the chat?
I would rather people reach out to you for it.
Perfect.
I like there to be a little bit of energy expended to get a hold of me, however minor it might be.
I'll put my email in the chat since some of these are not my students. How's that?
Okay.
That was good advice. Thank you so much. This was, as Chris said, this is pure gold, and we are definitely going to send the recording out to all the engineering departments and really highly encourage their students to view it. So you'll go viral. We'll make it go viral.
Yep. And Chris, as I mentioned, I'd love to have a copy of this because I like to go and review and see if there's any snippets I want to pull out of it for our own marketing, and also see if there are things I could do better in my presentation skills.
Yes, absolutely. I'll get you a copy of this.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for being with us tonight, and thank you all for coming. It was an excellent night and a lot of great advice, and hopefully we'll do it again.
All right.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Have a good evening. Good luck with your exams and studying and everything coming up, and job hunting, all of the above.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.